Hi, I'm Steve Carlson. I'm running for President of the United States in 2016 as an independent candidate. I'd like to pick up the endorsement of as many parties as I can, and I'm fighting for the restoration of the civil rights of independent voters in Minnesota, where the Minnesota Independence Party appears to have been doomed and destroyed by the duopoly of the two major national parties. The Democrats, here that's the DFL or Democratic Farmer Labor Party, a real dinosaur that reflects the attack on the old Democrats as communists, an attack led by Walter Mondale and Hubert Humphrey decades ago. And the Republicans. In Minnesota, it's called the Grand Old Party, the erstwhile party of Abraham Lincoln, founded in the 1850s, just over in Ripon, Wisconsin. And I was talking to people on Facebook and came across this item posted by Represent Us with a meme that blared out 60% of voters would replace every member of Congress right now if they could. And I'm here to tell you, Represent Us, that you can. Why do I say this? Well, this is a new time, not a new history, just a time that is new. There's much new in it. It's a time of massive change. That has to be changed for the good if America is to survive. People say, restore America. I say, restore America. But in reality, it's an issue of survival of America. Survival of its families, its free market, which all of us benefit from greatly. Not just rich people. Actually, rich people are more at risk because they have more to lose individually. And survival of the liberty in which this nation is conceived and founded, as Abraham Lincoln said so memorably. Restoring it is a goal. Survival is imperative. Survival of this nation is an imperative. And not only is this a new time, but this number, 60%, aligns with some other very important numbers that we see today. A recent NBC poll, you know, Donald Trump's friends, recently showed that 45% of voters now self-identify as independent. A news article said that this confirms the partisan political environment, the going it alone by Democrat Barack Obama is taking a toll on the Democrats and the Republicans, and that voter registration reveals self-identified independents are the fastest growing voting bloc in America. This happened in 2014 when I was nominated by independent voters to challenge Al Franken for the U.S. Senate spot from Minnesota. Well, Al was nowhere to be found. He ran and hid, and the mainstream media helped hide him. But the voter registration, and in Minnesota, a lot of those registering to vote submitted their email address so they could be contacted. The voters, when they registered, showed that 39% of them said they are independent. But now that number is 45%, up 6 points in less than a year. Wow. In the same poll, Democrats and Republicans combined only totaled 47%. That means 53% identified as independent or some third party. For instance, the Minnesota Independence Party, a major party in Minnesota under attack by the Democrats and Republicans and their hand-picked judges. We can do it. Trump has shown that if you're willing to fight and put your resources on the line and appeal to the greatness of America, you can make a difference. What an incredible story. But what would Trump do with this Congress? What would any real credible national leader do with this Congress? It cries out for independent members sent from the various states. Congress is a circus. Trump's a negotiator, but he has not yet waded into the fight against the establishment being waged in the U.S. Senate. But it's got to come because someone has to find a way to establish an effective national government in Washington before it's too late. Independent voters have a constitutional right to associate. That is from the First Amendment, clearly established in the case involving the independent candidate John B. Anderson. But right now, Congress is corrupt. It's gridlocked. It's unattainable. In Minnesota, the big party used Al Franken, the guy who wrote Rush Limbaugh is a big, fat, stupid idiot, This isn't something he wrote in the third grade, like the name sounds like. It's a bestseller for Minnesota Democrats. Oh, and it's very exciting. I started to read it. It's about footnotes. It's about whether or not Al is really friends with Ann Coulter or was just being polite. It's about whether liberals are patriots. Al has proof that liberals are patriots because he brought his spiel to USO performances and the rocket's red glare. Wow. But in Minnesota, Al is the celebrity, symbolic figurehead of a corrupt, defunct national party. The party that brought you Barack Obama and now wants to impose Hillary Clinton on you. And I don't want to get into some of the key election issues right now because I'm focused on the question, is it possible that the 60% of Americans can actually replace the entire Congress? And I say yes, it is possible. Yes, we can. But it takes work. It doesn't take money. No, it does not. It takes work, and it takes the inspiration of the real American Constitution. I've identified as a Tea Party candidate since I ran for the U.S. House in 2010 and ran against Franken for the U.S. Senate in 2014. And yes, Tea Party people are smart enough to know about the U.S. Constitution. You don't need a law professor to talk about it, and actually Barack Obama never talks about it anyway. I can only imagine his meetings and classes at the University of Chicago. They must have addressed, well, how can we tear down this Constitution? What are its weaknesses? What would Saul Alinsky have done if he were at Philadelphia in 1787 at the Constitutional Convention? One of the framers of the U.S. Constitution, Saul Alinsky of Chicago. Well, it would have looked like Barack Obama's inept administration was left as he retreats before Congress. And he only retreats before Congress because they're largely Republican, not because he really has any principled differences with them. I mean, he'll meet with Mitch McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader, and John Boehner, the Speaker of the House, and he'll just work things out. They're going to have to put some kind of fix together in September so the government doesn't shut down or the nation go off a cliff. Last time it was the sequester, and that's not working. Just slashing all federal spending and slashing that monster spending at extremely high levels of federal debt and deficit creation, and slashing it across the board, threatening our national security. But again, Obama has no real principled difference with the Democrats or Republican congressional leaders because they are unable to move. They just take little small steps to nowhere. You've heard of the bridge to nowhere? Well, this is the government to nowhere. But right now, ignored by the media and ignored by the Washington politicians, we have 60% of voters who say, replace them all. How can we do that? And we have Donald Trump, who is putting some spine in an otherwise sleepy, hopeless election. You want hope and change? Well, it's change from hope to hopeless, to despair that we have created. And our economy is staggering along with part-time jobs while investors look abroad for opportunity, and automation and technology are knocking on our door to cause even more destruction, more job destruction, family destruction, community destruction. Now, am I urging doom and gloom? No, but our hope lies not in the two national parties, in the duopolies, with their weak, unsound establishments, warring constantly to get an edge. Our hope lies with this 60%. And the only question is, can the great collective consciousness of America, its voters, contrary to media accounts, we're actually not unconscious when we vote. There's got to be another explanation for Washington. This great collective consciousness of voters needs to come up with a way to replace every member of Congress, to have a total makeover of Congress, so we can secure our rights, our liberties, and restore America to its rightful place. And 60% of voters want to do this right now, if they could. They are the great American collective consciousness. They want to make America great again. by getting rid of this Congress, replacing them all. Here's some more numbers. 53%. That is the number of voters who don't want to line up behind one of the two big national parties, the Democrats or the Republicans. Many of them will just drop out. They won't vote at all in 2016. In 2014, when Al Franken was on the run, we had the lowest voter turnout in decades across the nation. In 2014, those who said they were just independent, not with any third party, like the Minnesota Independence Party, this number had reached 41%, the highest in history. That's 41% compared to much, much smaller numbers of Democrat and Republican backers. They could have won. The independent voters associated with the Minnesota Independence Party or other small parties could have won if the media had not boxed them out, actually plotting against them in the national press during the election. They plotted against third parties across the nation, advocating eliminating third parties from debates for federal office. The media masters are going for the money, the billions of dollars they receive for their rabid, twisted coverage of campaigns that now looks like reality TV. Their support for sensational identity politics, their attacks on the core institutions of American society. For all this, they take billions for 30-second sound bites that drill nausea and inane slogans into the American collective consciousness. No wonder now that 41% figure is risen to 45% of people who identify as just independent. And with the two national parties combined at just 47%, that's a virtual dead heat with the purely independent voters. Then you have your third parties, just like Abraham Lincoln Republicans were a third party when he won the election and ended slavery. Actually, there were four parties in that race. And the third parties account for that other 8%. And if the two corrupt national parties, Democrats and Republicans, had not corruptly eliminated a major party because they don't want competition, many of the 45% of the voters might vote for them if they can break the gridlock and lethargy of Congress. But basically right now, we have 53% of the voters aligned against the Democrats and their identity politics. Identity politics, that's when they whip up a campaign to just elect someone who's black, or just elect someone who's a woman, and they beat down everybody else. The mass media goes crazy, pushing this line, and they just roll over the American people and into Washington. And I don't have time to go into right now just how destructive this already has been, and just how destructive it will be, and just how destroyed America and its Constitution are going to be. So somebody said the other day, we have to get rid of John Boehner as Speaker. We've got to get rid of Mitch McConnell as Majority Leader, because they did nothing about the barbaric sale of the body parts of little babies. They did nothing about the onerous, heavy burden of rising premiums forced on Americans by Obamacare, about the rampant growth of the federal debt, even with sequester, which has a doomsday scenario. That's all it was, sequester, a doomsday scenario that no one would agree to. This was a crazy idea of Barack Obama. Forced Congress to come up with something. Some leader, Obama is. Well, they didn't come up with anything, and now the fiscal cliff is still with us. It's just dragging us down off that mountaintop. It's creating programs that don't work, can't work, creating empty promises, and is tying the hands of our military while we are under attack, while Christians are being attacked, while families and little babies are being destroyed. Here in Minnesota, they've extended the statute of limitations, the DFL has, so they can attack, persecute, and destroy the Catholic Church, a church that provides hope for millions, taking that away as they roll on with their statist version of the future. And this fiscal cliff is still there, looming as large as ever. Again, in September, Congress's inability to act in the face of a fanatical lone wolf, a washed-up Democrat in the White House, they're facing the need again to get some kind of agreement to keep the government running. And of course, the Republican establishment leaders are terrified that with our stupid, can I use that word, mass media, they are going to go into 2016 accused of shutting down the government. Again, this is all you're going to hear. Well, we know that Obama and his out-of-control Democrats are the ones who are deliberately trying to shut down the government. But they're going to cover it just as if it is the Republican obstructionists, people like Ted Cruz, like Mike Lee in the Senate, who are opposing sequester, opposing the manipulation of the overly concentrated power in the hands of a Barack Obama, who has gone off the rails. And now they want to force Hillary Clinton, bring the Clintons back in. And the presumptive nominee, the establishment hopes, Jeb Bush, what's his idea? Phase out Medicare, having been unable to repeal or modify the scandalous Obamacare. Just throw up your hands and phase out medical care in retirement. What have we come to? So we've got to get our collective consciousness of America to make America great again. And we have to do something about this Congress. We have got to help them to fight against this Frankenstein White House. And to do this, we've got to replace them. So how do we do that? We need to focus on those 53% of 2016 voters who are independent. Also, we need to utilize the internet. We need to destroy the hegemony of broadcast media. They're on their last legs anyway. They're addicted to campaign contributions, all that unprecedented spending. Well, that goes to them, and they're addicted to it. That's why they become so crazy. They're addicts, and they believe, I don't know how they can believe this, that they will lead America into this new history, their so-called grand vision of our future. While the Constitution sits shrouded in darkness, mobilizing the 53%, and what do you see in Trump and Sanders? That is not just disappointment with Bush and Clinton. That's a media scandal. They're misreporting the news. This 53% is giving support to those who will challenge a decrepit establishment, a weak, punch-drunk establishment that is destroying itself and America with it. If the people can't snap out of it, and the challengers are going to have to bring it, and I want to bring it as an independent candidate for president, and we have to work the internet and break through the duopoly lock on debate, on free expression, and on freedom of association of this 53%. Pull in the other 7% and replace this Congress. Fundamentally transform this Congress. We've got to go out on the internet and bring these challengers to the incumbents into the national spotlight and lead. This is better than term limits. Of course, we need to look at the specifics of each state. How many congressional districts in the House are just gerrymandered in by partisan redistricting? And how is that being used corruptly to simply eliminate any real alternatives or real quality thinking to address America's woes and to reignite our vision and our liberty, our will to participate and not just survive the Obama economy? And we need to focus on what's happening in Washington, much like the actions of Mitch McConnell are now being scrutinized, and he is being called out by Cruz. Through it all, we need, on the internet, the social media, and I believe voter email addresses need to be available to all parties and candidates. They can't be hoarded while American democracy is being bought and sold on Wall Street. We need vigorous interaction of ideas. We need to awaken. There must be an independent awakening in 2016. I want to help lead that. I'm Steve Carlson. I'm an independent candidate for president from Minnesota. I'm awake, and I want you to be awake too. And I approve this message. Let me close by citing a humble, caring man who instilled hope. Fred Rogers. He said, "We live in a world in which we need to share responsibility. It's easy to say, it's not my child, not my community, not my world, not my problem. Then there are those who see the need and respond. I consider those people my heroes," he said. And Fred Rogers is a hero for me. He cared about and inspired the children. Let us awaken and inspire America to make America great again. I hope that's not trademarked. Let's restore America's greatness right now.